Hello there, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. My name is Tatiana Arno. I am your city engineer, and I'm here to present on the proposed Speed Hump program. So the recommendation is that the city council approve the proposed Speed Hump program as outlined in the staff report, and to direct the city manager or his designee to implement procedures to effectuate the program as outlined in the staff report. So why would we consider a Speed Hump program in the first place? Primarily, this is to help address any speeding and or cut through traffic on residential streets. It is one of the many traffic calming tools that we should have in our toolbox to address speeding issues across the board. We do get a significant amount of requests. We estimate that we've had roughly 200 over the last 5-year period come in. This program will help us define an engineering approach for the actual implementation of speed humps across the board. So we need to make sure that we're standardizing the way that we're analyzing each location in order to determine where it's appropriate to put a speed hump, right? This program should help us establish priorities, and it is part of the traditional 3 E's for traffic calming. And what I mean by the 3 E's is that's basically how the city responds to neighborhood traffic concerns. The 3 E's stand for education, enforcement, or engineering. On the enforcement side, this enlists the assistance of the police department to focus enforcement efforts in key areas. That's via traditional enforcement and automated enforcement, such as radar and photo. On the education side, it provides neighbors with information about how they, as motorists, can help ease traffic impacts in their community through changes in behavior and attitudes, and inform them about neighborhood traffic management activities and opportunities. So some examples of that are speed trailers and speed feedback signs, public awareness programs, and maybe via the neighborhood council newsletters, things like that. And then maybe signage wherever it's appropriate. So those are on the education side, what we look at. And then for engineering, it typically includes techniques that are physical changes, such as pavement markings, roadway narrowing, raised intersections, traffic circles, signage, partial road closures, median islands, and other vertical or horizontal offsets. And so that basically these are just different engineering techniques that we use to help slow people down in our neighborhoods. But I do need to note that speed humps are typically one of the last options that are explored with regards to traffic calming devices. They do have merit in specific circumstances, but there are disadvantages to them, and that will be noted later in this presentation as well. So let's first talk about what are speed humps versus speed bumps. So a speed hump is typically used in public streets in residential areas only. They are, generally speaking, 12 feet wide and between 3 to 4 inches high, and they come in sets of 3. And this is so that we can get a better reduction in speeding. If you just put one in, the person might slow down a little bit to get over the first one, but then they'll just go ahead and accelerate again. When you put them in sets of 3, that extends the period of time that they're slowing down, and thus the idea is that they'll slow down across the board. Speed bumps, on the other hand, are not recommended on public streets, and this is through the Federal Highway Association as well as ITE. We do typically see these in shopping centers, apartment complexes, and other private properties. They're abrupt, meaning they're very short in length, maybe 12 to 18 inches wide, and then they're up to 6 inches high. So these would not be effective whatsoever on a public street, and in fact could cause some major damage on vehicles depending on the speed that they're approaching. So again, kind of going back to the concept that I brought up earlier, these speed humps are considered only after all other options, enforcement, and other traffic calming tools have been reviewed and implemented, right? So this is kind of the last resort in our toolbox as far as traffic calming. So what can the speed hump do? They act as devices in reducing speeding in neighborhood streets, and they do help modify cut-through traffic patterns. What they can't do, though, is You certainly cannot put these on high volume roads like arterials or collector roads. That is absolutely not something that can happen. We do get those requests quite a bit, actually. There are other ways to help reduce speeds there, but typically that is done via enforcement. Humps typically or should be used sets of 3 to be effective. Like I mentioned previously, if you only put one in, they might slow down a little bit, but generally speaking, it won't slow the motorist down for the length of wherever their street segment that they're speeding through, right? So if we put 3 in, it typically sends the message, and it'll be more effective. And they should not be installed on streets where there are known drainage and flooding issues, right? So speed humps kind of provide a physical barrier, if you will, for drainage patterns and just water flows. And so that has to be considered as part of this. As far as what the city has done previously, there was a speed hump program as early as 2005. There isn't a lot of information on it, so it's unclear what the goals and objectives of that program were. Whatever we did find basically indicates that the program was halted due to concerns with emergency vehicle response times expressed by the fire department. So that is something that we're taking very seriously with this proposed program moving forward. And we are working closely with the fire department as well as police department in developing the speed hump program that we're bringing before you. So we did find documentation that a program was presented to the Transportation Policy Committee in 2017 and 2018, but it never went through for adoption by City Council. So that's a little bit about what the city has done previously. What we have here is some examples of speed humps. The first one, the top left corner, letter A, that's a speed hump where there's a raised hump all the way across the entire street. There are no breaks in between. And similar with C. And then for B and D, you see that there's essentially some breaks in between. And what that indicates is that that is where the emergency vehicles are able to cut through this. So basically, the width of that cut through is, or the breaks in the speed hump are determined by the width of the axles of the emergency vehicle so that they can just go and speed right through. Typically, these do not match the width of an axle of a typical vehicle. So no matter what, a person would still have to somehow go over the speed hump at any given time with these. So all that to say, they're still effective and also address the concerns of the fire department and their response times. So some of the pros and cons of speed humps, as far as the pros go, as we all know, they will reduce vehicular speeds. They can reduce certain types of collisions, and we definitely should see a reduction in cut-through traffic with the installation of these. As far as the cons go, so this list is quite extensive, but the biggest con is even if we put the speed humps with the breaks in between for emergency vehicles, it will still increase emergency response time. There is no way to make that increase down to a net zero. So the ones with the breaks definitely help with it, but they still have to slow down to some degree as they're going there to make sure that they're lined up well with where the break in the speed hump is. So that is something that is important and must be noted. There will be increased noise, especially in the homes that are immediately adjacent to where the speed humps are placed. I mentioned it previously, you will see an increase of speed between the humps of about at least a mile per hour. So that is something to consider. It does definitely increase the cost for maintenance of the public and private vehicles across the board, right? So every time you hit these bumps, it affects just the longevity of the components within the car each time. It does have an impact to drainage, parking, and street sweeping. Residents living on the block will be the ones driving over the speed humps most frequently. So that is something that the residents in that neighborhood would have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It may require placement of the speed humps or warning signs in front of someone's home. So all of a sudden, like I said, these speed humps will be in front of homes. They'll be noisy, but they'll also be signage in front of the home. It does impact fuel consumption and ADA It might move the problem elsewhere. So, while it might decrease cut-through traffic or speeding on one street in a residential neighborhood, putting speed humps there might then create a problem in an adjacent street in that same neighborhood where people are then going to use that other street to cut through and speed through. There is a cost for installation, so that is huge. We currently do not have any budget to install these speed humps, so that is something that needs to be considered. And it does also add to the long-term and routine maintenance costs as well. So as far as the program goes, some key elements include the process. So basically, the process needs to be well defined. And so there will be an eligibility criteria. So at a minimum, traffic volume has to be between 500 and 2,000 vehicles per day. A residential street with posted speed limit of 25 or 30 miles per hour. And it needs to be a minimum of 1,000 feet in length. So this goes back to, we need to establish a procedure for how we're going to do this, right? And so this is the analysis component. The 85th percent speed must be 9 miles per hour over the posted speed limit, or 5 or more collisions resulted from vehicular speeds in a 12-month period. So this is the technical side of things. This is how we figure out whether or not somebody or a request for a speed hump is eligible in the first place. As far as the process goes, applications for speed humps will be accepted from any resident, neighborhood council, school, or other entity whose property is abutting the requested street segment. If the street meets the minimum eligibility criteria that I just discussed, then the traffic engineering division will perform an in-depth traffic study of the area in question prior to making a final determination. This process can take approximately 2 months to complete. Once a determination is made by the traffic engineering division, the applicant will be notified of the outcome by mail. If approved to proceed, a map showing the proposed speed hump location will be mailed to the applicant along with a petition form to be signed by designated area residents indicating support or opposition of the speed hump. It is the responsibility of the applicant, this is important, it's the responsibility of the applicant to collect the signatures by the date indicated on the response from the city. This is critical. Without this, it won't move forward. Once the required signatures have been collected, a minimum of 67% or 2/3 of the designated residents, either owner or tenants, the applicant shall then return the collected petition forms to the city for review and verification. Completed applications will be reviewed and ranked according to the criteria and ranking system list that we have listed in the staff report. And we also do need to go through a review and approval process by fire and PD as well. So in addition to traffic engineering, fire and PD will be looking at these. And so like I mentioned, we need a neighborhood petition signed by 2/3. It could be owners or tenants. As far as the ranking goes, we would like to distribute these equally amongst the council districts. There will be a 3-year period where it will be valid. So we will consider in 3 funding cycles, ranking points added each cycle that it's not funded. It will expire after the 3 funding cycles and will require a new written application or petition if it hasn't been completed already. So it is a process. And again, the actual ranking criteria is specified in more depth in the actual staff report. Some key elements as far as just to make it easy for you on a flow chart, right? So we're saying there's an initial complaint for speeding or cut through traffic. We basically go through a yes/no flow chart. Is the request form received expressing interest in speed humps? If not, then other traffic calming measures are suggested. If yes, then an engineering speed study is conducted. If the speed study indicates that there's a speeding problem, if there's not a speeding problem, then again, other traffic calming measures are suggested. Otherwise, petition forms and the proposal is sent to the resident/neighborhood, like the neighborhood council is what we're talking about here. The petition needs to basically be returned with a 67% affirmative. So not just 67% of the people saying yes or no, it's 67% of the people who sign the petition need to have said yes. If you do not obtain a 67% affirmative, then other traffic calming measures are suggested. If yes, then it goes basically into the ranking, again, as outlined in the staff report. And from there, we plan on adding a speed hump project to the CIP, but this will really be based on available funding and overall prioritization. Once funding becomes available and basically speed hump locations have been prioritized, we'll go into the final design and construction. So here's a little bit about the ranking. So for the traffic speed, the percentage of vehicles traveling at more than 10 miles per hour, the posted speed limit on proposed projects, street divided by 2, 40 points maximum, and so on and so forth. So there is a point system by which we will be evaluating and ranking these. So for schools, 5 points for each private or public elementary, middle, or high school within the area that's benefited by the proposed speed hump. And then there's a slew of other points that can be gained as part of this process. As far as the funding goes, speed studies cost about $500 per location. The design and construction is approximately $25,000 in today's dollars, including signs and markings and 3 speed humps per segment on average. So this includes the 3 speed humps. And then we anticipate that it's going to cost approximately $500 per year per location to maintain. So something that has to be considered. One way that we are proposing to actually fund this is to fund by council district, maybe $50,000 per district and 1 or 2 locations per district per year. So again, that's because it's approximately $25,000 per location, right? So that's how we're coming up with that. And so with that in mind, it would cost approximately $300,000 per year to fund up to 2 locations per district per year. There is an option that was explored with regards to private funding. At this time, it is not recommended by staff. It does exist in other agencies, but it can create equity issues. So that is something that should council want to move forward with an option to utilize private funding for this, it certainly, there are examples in other places that it has been done and can be up for debate and consideration, but it is not recommended by staff at this time. As far as the review process goes, there are a lot of departments involved in reviewing this. That includes police, fire, street maintenance division, environmental resources, and the city attorney's office. That's obviously in addition to public works, traffic engineering. We did go to the Public Works and Transportation Committee on September 17th of this year to present this program. This was approved as far as what the staff recommended by 3-0, and now we're here seeking council approval of this program. And as far as comments from fire and police, fire's comments revolve around, again, response delay concerns. They did want us to note that the modern fire growth curve doubles every 60 seconds. The survival rate for cardiac arrest is estimated to be around 50% when CPR is administered within 3 to 5 minutes. However, the survival decreases by 7 to 10% with each minute that defibrillation is delayed. So again, their concern is getting to people that need their help as quickly as possible, and this will definitely delay them in that. Speed cushions, which is what I was referring to earlier with regards to helping, just looking at things that would assist fire with getting to where they need to be faster. They could be used to help minimize delays with large fire vehicles, but we have to note that while the large vehicles can pass through those 2 gaps within those, ambulances or smaller response vehicles cannot, and so those will be slowed down. As far as the police department goes, same thing, the potential delay in emergency response. However, they do anticipate minimal impact with the police vehicles themselves. They do support speed humps as an effective traffic calming device where the data supports their installation. The systematic process to request speed humps reduces complaints coming to PD to assist with analysis. So this will help them overall with their operation. And speed humps would reduce the time spent doing directed enforcement at the problem location, allowing police resources to focus on other areas. So generally speaking, both departments are supportive of this. with the caveat being that the fire department has to note that in some instances they do acknowledge that it may slow them down. That does conclude this presentation. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm happy to take any questions.